I worked the overnight shift at that gas station for almost 2 years, and in all that time, only one night ever made me quit a job on the spot. Even now, years later, I still think about it, and it still gives me a weird feeling in my gut because I never really found out what was going on. When this happened, I was about 24 years old. It was 2019, and I was living in a small town, a place where not much ever really happened. I mean, everybody knew everybody, or at least they knew someone who knew someone. I had a pretty standard routine back then. I worked at the one gas station on the edge of town, usually the late shift, which was from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. It was a pretty quiet job. Most nights, I just stocked shelves, cleaned up, and read a lot of bad paperback thrillers. My drive home was usually about 15 minutes. It was all pretty much country roads, a lot of open fields, and then a little stretch through some woods before I hit the turnoff for my street. Nothing exciting, just the usual commute. That particular night had been pretty uneventful up until that point. It was a Tuesday, I think. Not much traffic, just a couple of regulars who came in for coffee and some truckers stopping to fill up. The weather was a little drizzly, kind of an annoying mist that made the road look slick and everything feel a bit damp. I clocked out right at 6 that morning, just as the sun was thinking about coming up. It was still pretty dark out, that in-between time when the streetlights are off, but the sky hasn't quite decided to be bright yet. I got into my old beat-up Honda Civic, started it up, and pulled out of the parking lot. The first part of the drive was the same as always. I passed Farmer Johnson's field, then the old abandoned barn that everyone said was haunted, though I never saw anything. The road was empty, just me and the hum of my engine. Everything was normal until I took my usual shortcut. Now, this shortcut wasn't really a shortcut in terms of distance, but it cut out a particularly annoying stretch of stoplights on the main road. It was an older, narrower road, a bit bumpy and less maintained, but I preferred it because it was usually completely deserted. Tonight was no different, or so I thought. I had just turned onto the shortcut maybe a minute or two in when I saw headlights in the distance. They were moving pretty slow, even for this road. As I got closer, I saw it was an older model sedan, dark colored, maybe a Ford Taurus or something similar, and it was going maybe 15 miles an hour, with its hazards on. Now, that struck me as odd. Hazards usually mean you are pulled over or in distress, but this car was clearly moving, just incredibly slowly. I thought maybe they had a flat tire or engine trouble, but they weren't swerving or anything. They were just crawling along. I usually don't get impatient on the road, especially not when I am already tired and just want to get home. But this was ridiculous. I was stuck behind them for what felt like an eternity, probably only 5 or 6 minutes. But it felt longer because I could see my house in my mind's eye. The road was curving, and it was hard to see if there was any oncoming traffic. I squinted through the mist and the weak glow of my headlights. Finally, there was a straight stretch, and I decided to pass. It felt like an obvious thing to do. I signaled, checked my mirrors, and started to pull out. As I got alongside the car, I glanced over. The windows were tinted dark, which wasn't unusual, but it made it impossible to see inside. What was unusual was when my headlights caught the driver's side window. It rolled down slowly, just enough for me to see a face. It was a woman, I think. Her hair was dark, pulled back tight, and her face was pale. She looked directly at me, and then she did something I'll never forget. She put her hand up, index finger pointing back towards my car, past me, and her lips moved. No sound came out, but I could clearly read her words. She mouthed, "Don't stop." My foot instinctively eased off the gas for a second, partly from surprise and partly from a strange sense of confusion. But then something in her eyes, a look of genuine fear, made me stomp on it. I sped up past her, my heart doing a little thump 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 against my ribs. What did she mean, "Don't stop"? Why was she going so slow? What was behind me? I wasn't a brave person. I wasn't someone who looked for trouble. My first instinct in situations like that is usually to just get away from them as quickly as possible. So I kept going. I passed her car fully, and as soon as I was in front of her, I remembered what she had done, how she pointed. My eyes flicked to my rearview mirror, and that's when I saw it. Behind the slow-moving car with its hazards on, there was another car. This one was entirely dark, no headlights, nothing. It had been tailing her, and by extension me, for who knows how long. It was far back enough that I hadn't noticed it before, especially with the mist and the darkness. But there it was, a dark shape against the faintly lightening sky, just a few car lengths behind the hazard's car. My blood ran cold. The woman hadn't been warning me about her car or her slow driving. She was warning me about something else, something I hadn't even noticed. This wasn't some slow driver who had engine trouble. I pressed the gas pedal harder, my old Civic whining a bit in protest. I didn't care. I needed to get home. I needed to get away from whatever that was. I kept checking my rear view mirror, but it was hard to tell if the dark car was speeding up or not. It was just a shape in the distance, a void where headlights should have been. The hazard car was now completely behind me, just a pair of blinking red lights that were getting smaller and smaller. But the dark car, that dark silent car, was still there. I was getting closer to the turnoff from my street now, maybe another 2 minutes away. My mind was racing. Who were these people? What did they want? Was it a robbery? Carjacking? My wallet only had about $50 in it, and an old debit card. My car was practically worthless. Was it something worse? I didn't want to think about worse. I kept my eyes glued to the rearview mirror, but I also tried to watch the road ahead. The mist was still hanging in the air, making everything seem a little blurry and indistinct. Then, as I rounded a bend, the dark car behind the hazard car started to pick up speed. I could see it more clearly now. It was a darker SUV, I thought. I couldn't make out any details, just its general shape, but it was definitely accelerating. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I knew then that I wasn't just imagining things. This was real. And whatever was happening, I was in the middle of it. I slammed on the gas, pushing my old car as fast as it would go. 60, 70, almost 80 miles an hour on a narrow, bumpy country road that was definitely not meant for that kind of speed. I was probably risking an accident, but at that moment it felt like my only option. I took the turn onto my street without even slowing down. It was a sharp turn, and my tires squealed in protest. I almost overshot it. My house was only a few blocks down. I could see the porch light, a little beacon in the pre-dawn gloom. I drove right up my driveway, pulled almost onto my lawn, and killed the engine. Silence. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped them. I got out of the car, practically ran to my front door, and slammed it shut behind me. I locked it. Then I locked the deadbolt, and then I went to the window, pulled back the curtain an inch, and peeked out. Nothing. The street was empty. My driveway was empty. No slow car with hazards, no dark SUV, just the quiet morning air, the mist still clinging to the trees. It was like it had all just vanished. I stood there for a long time, just watching, my mind trying to process what had just happened. Was I overtired? Was I imagining things? But that woman's face, her eyes filled with fear, the whispered "don't stop," that felt very real, and the dark car with no headlights. That felt very real too. I must have stayed by that window for 20 minutes, just watching the street, half expecting to see something, but nothing came. Eventually the sun started to come up properly, and the world began to look less menacing. The mist lifted and the familiar sights of my street started to emerge. My neighbor's dog started barking. A car drove by delivering newspapers. The world was normal again, but I wasn't. I couldn't shake the feeling. I didn't know what to do. Should I call the police? What would I even tell them? That some unknown woman in a car with hazards on told me not to stop because another car with no headlights was behind her. They'd probably think I was crazy or had been up too long. I didn't have any concrete information, no license plates, no clear description of anyone. It would just sound like a really weird fever dream. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just a strange coincidence. Maybe the woman truly had car trouble, and the dark car was a family member coming to help, and she was just trying to signal me to go on my way. Maybe I misread her lips. Maybe it was all a big misunderstanding fueled by my own exhaustion. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. The fear in her eyes was too raw, too genuine. I didn't go to work that night. I called in sick, which I almost never did. I told my boss I had a stomach bug. I couldn't bring myself to drive that road again, not yet, not knowing what might be out there. The next day, I started looking for a new job. I know it sounds extreme, quitting a job over one strange incident, but I just couldn't face that drive anymore. My mind kept replaying that woman's face, her silent warning, the dark car that appeared out of nowhere. I kept thinking about what might have happened if I had stopped. I never heard anything about it on the local news. No reports of strange occurrences on the country roads. No accidents involving a slow car or a dark SUV, nothing. It was like that night just dissolved back into the general hum of everyday life. I moved away from that town a few months later for unrelated reasons, or at least that's what I told myself. But a part of me always wondered, was I really just looking for a fresh start, or was I running away from something I couldn't